Hello and welcome to this edition of Crossover. I'm Chi Xiaojun with Heidi and Julian. First, we're going to bring up a story. Well, basically, it's some information released by an international organization. It should be interesting to you, Julian.
Why?
Listen. Well, basically, it's about an article. It's titled Attractive Composite Faces. The author is called Sun Chol-hee, and it's published by the International Society of Aesthetic Plastic Surgery. So basically, we are talking about these beautiful faces and what faces are supposed to be the beautiful faces.
Of course, in the recent ones, Halle Berry. I've always have this little thing for Halle Berry.
Yeah.
The older stars, for me, that moment has nothing to do with plastic surgery or the placement of your nose and eyes. Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca.
Wow.
For me, those moments, especially the moment when she comes back in the bar at Rick's Cafe and sees Sam playing the piano, and then I think it's actually she sees Rick, and you see the tears about to come out of the eyes. You see the look in her eyes. I've never seen such a beautiful thing on a woman's face.
It's more than just about her face. It's more than about, you know,
it's about an emotional
yeah.
sort of reaction, would you say?
But what do you think of these, say, beautiful faces?
I don't think there is a standard. I think the way that, for example, I think a lot of French women are beautiful, but not because they look perfect, but because the way that they carry themselves, confidence, just like a certain aura.
Okay, it's just both of you are being high profile, but let's just take a look at these pictures. And you say there isn't a standard, but according to this professor, well, at least there are some references that we can refer to. Take a look. Well, these are the 4 pictures referring to African, Caucasian, Chinese, and Japanese.
They actually made the face.
Yeah,
this is
that's
not
true.
the
That's not
face,
the no.
That's not a real person.
No.
It's like a composite, is it?
No.
But the third one is clearly Zhang Ziyi, I think.
Well, she's like the base, you know.
Yeah, well, they do.
It's like a mix of Zhang Ziyi and Gong Li and all these famous Chinese actresses or singers.
Right.
Yeah.
I know Jessica Alba has been said to be like one of the most perfect faces, and especially she has a few different origins, and she has always been talked about a lot, especially in China. Because I mean, I don't know if you feel like you grew up in Australia, but have you been in China for many years, or?
I've been back and forth for many years, yeah, and I have noticed that this idea of beauty is so different from culture to culture.
But do you have the feeling? Because I have this feeling very strongly that especially Chinese girls and women, when they asked. You know, they're always curious to know what I, as a foreigner, as a Westerner or a French person, think beauty is. And they always have to kind of correct me in a way. A lot of the Chinese women
telling you what is beautiful, what is not, or what?
Yeah, because when I say something, if I say this woman says, but have you seen her nose? But have you seen they always look at the way plastic surgeons kind of think. They always look that way. And I never encounter people talking like that in France, for example, but I hear that in China, so I want to know if you hear that too.
Because Heidi, you were born in China.
I was born in Beijing, yes.
Yeah, and you live in Australia for all these years.
Yeah,
and do you feel there's, you know, different ways of seeing beauty?
Absolutely. I mean, for example, and I know it's been talked about a lot, but paleness is very much valued here. Yeah. And everyone says to me, oh, you're so lucky, you're so white. Whereas when I'm back home, you know, everyone loves the tan because it's very much a beach culture. And a tan means that you're healthy, and being healthy is very beautiful.
Basically, that's also a sign of being rich or not, or living a different life.
That's right, being on a cruise or working in the fields, very different connotations.
And it's interesting because if you say being rich or not, in China, people would think, well, if you are rich, you are pale because you can stay at home and
indoors.
Whereas people who are working, especially in the field or outside, they are the one who are going to be tan. Whereas we think differently. Oh, obviously the really well-tanned people, I mean, not all rich, but we would think that, you know, the rich people have even more opportunities because they have a yacht, they can go, they can be on the sea all the time. You know, it's a different way of thinking.
But basically today we're talking about face. You know, what faces are seen as the beautiful faces, and just now that was a composite picture and of people from different races or from different areas in the world. And if you go to another extreme, we have even theories about proportions. of faces. We're going to show you another picture. It seems everything can be measured. Beauty can be measured. It's about the length between two pupils and your forehead, length ratio and width ratio. Distance from pupil to pupil is 46% of overall width of face. From inside edge of ear to inside edge of ear. And the length ratio is distance from midpoint of eyes to midpoint of mouth. And that should be 36% overall length of face from hairline to chin.
But how did they work this out?
I mean, scientists, they worked really hard to reach this.
They've been measuring a lot of women's faces, I think.
This is the funniest line I've heard in a while. Scientists, they work really hard to reach this.
Do we have a line that you want to measure that?
No, but, you know, I think we can laugh a little bit. I understand their work because, I mean, Da Vinci, you say Da Vinci in English too? Da Vinci, Leonardo da Vinci had, I mean, artists, anyway, you know, have painters, sculptors. They have, of course, they have their own standards of beauty in a way, but it's a little different because it's that would be in an artistic kind of way. But in terms of really human relations, the way you perceive the beauty of a human being, let's say we still talk about, you know, in terms of from an art perspective. You look at someone's face. You know, there's this beauty, Korean beauty called Jing Qishan in China. I don't know her name in English, but she used to be like the #1 Korean girl. But when I see her, I feel nothing. I don't feel anything. I see her talk. I think that she's better off not, you know, she's much more beautiful when she's not speaking and just staying still, you know? If this is the form of beauty we want, this is very, very strange.
I agree. I find this sort of search for perfection and symmetry very boring, and it leaves me cold. I like people to have character, I think. Okay. I think that's what makes someone beautiful. And
it has been said that if people were perfectly symmetrical, it would not be beautiful. It would not be perceived as beautiful, actually.
Well, actually, we are going to show you some pictures after a short break. And according to this theory, who are the beautiful faces? Who are the perfect faces? A short break. And welcome back to Crossover. Just now we've been talking about these proportions, or the perfect proportions of women's faces that we are looking for. Say, according to that theory, we have some perfect examples.
After makeup.
Well, anyway, I mean, it's about the proportions, so makeup or not. So these three are supposed to be these beautiful faces.
Shania Twain, personally, I've never really felt anything for her, but Jessica Alba, Liz Hurley, of course, have always been, you know, I mean, many people like them, obviously.
And according to this theory, there is a very famous woman in the picture and the masterpiece. Well, she is considered to be the ugly one. According to that theory, she's not beautiful at all.
I always thought the appeal of the Mona Lisa is more about her enigma, her gaze, and the way that, you know, you can't stop looking at her, and, you know, she's kind of looking at everyone. I never thought it was about her proportions or her physical beauty. It's just kind of more her aura. And
if you put everything into these numbers and digits, and it's not beauty anymore. No. It's beauty is basically a personal thing. But, you know, scientists, they have their figures, they have their statistics. That is the research. Well, I think those examples, Shania Twain, Jessica Alba, Liz Hurley, they all seem to be from kind of a male perspective. I mean, I know a lot of my friends have a very classical definition of beauty, like Audrey Hepburn, Grace Kelly. Maybe not people with a sex appeal as such, but a very kind of classic beauty, you know.
It's interesting you mentioned Grace Kelly, because Chinese people don't talk about her at all. But she was so, I mean, for Europeans, and male and female, she was one of the most beautiful women. She was, well, she was in, I think she was in some of the Hitchcock movies, and
yeah, she was a classic Hitchcock blonde.
Exactly, and she was a big story back in the day. And Audrey Hepburn in China is huge. It's a huge name. And somehow Grace Kelly has kind of forgotten here.
Maybe that's because Audrey Hepburn has like a cuteness about her, you know. She's sort of, she's like a little doe-eyed, you know, little doll.
I guess it's also, it has something to do with what kind of movies are being shown here in China, and Chinese viewers are more familiar with certain works.
And another thing, you're talking about this cuteness, and this brings to another thing which is very cute when we talk about it. Sometimes I try to kind of draw some conclusions about differences in terms of beauty judging. And Chinese people sometimes tend to really look at the proportions of your, what they call the 5 elements or organs on
we
the,
have
on the
that
head.
actually.
Exactly, yeah.
Well, according to this theory, and the face has been divided into, well, certain areas, and if it is vertically, it's 5 parts, and your eyes should be the base of that 5 proportions or 5 parts. So your eyes, 2 parts, and the rest, the other 3 parts.
Mm-hmm.
And horizontally, there should be 3 parts, and the length of your nose should be the base. So that is 3 parts of the length of your nose.
So what should be the thickness of your skin then? Tell me that.
Well, maybe that is your research.
I think you could pioneer something there.
We never use a liner, you know, to measure all these lengths. And
I don't meet someone and go, hang on, let me just get out my ruler. Exactly. I want to see whether your proportions are good enough.
And there's another thing we don't talk about is that, you know, we are in this business. We see a lot of stars before and after makeup, and it changes a lot. First of all, it changes the form of the face quite a bit in everyday life, and even more because it is aimed at the camera, and even more in front of a camera. So it's very tricky to talk about. We can only talk about the face of those stars, the way it appears on camera, because you know that we can make a face look from a certain angle. You know that. If you do some TV series, a lot of
Julian
stars.
is saying these faces not the real faces after makeup. What do you think?
You never know.
I agree. And I think when you meet someone in person, you can so often be disappointed if you meet a famous actor or actress. You think, oh, you know, they're much shorter or they're not as beautiful. And the camera does amazing things. You know, some people just look like completely
And so
different.
many stars, actually, if you pay attention, if they give one side of their face, they will always give the same side.
That's why you always sit
better
in
side.
over there, yeah?
Is this your more beautiful side?
Sure, but I can give you I'm not that picky. And so it brings the conversation to something deeper, which is that looking at the proportions is one thing, but what if you add a smile in that? It changes the proportions on the level, like it adds some other elements to the face. It's not only the expression of a you know.
Well, I mean, basically, it's just for your reference, and believe it or not, it's there, and it's the result of their research. But talking about these standards of being beautiful in China, it's been changing, it's been evolving, you know, over all these years. If you go back to old times and ancient times, and if you go back to these traditional figures like Lin Daiyu in that classic literature classic, so she's seen as the classic idea of being beautiful. You see this small face, a small mouth,
and fragile woman who needs to be taken care of. What the traditional Chinese men like, because
so
they feel strong.
this is a very much a traditional and a classic figure of Chinese beauty.
Yeah, this is from the old
Yes.
Holong
1983 version.
Yeah. I think the first time I saw it, because my mum had always talked about it, it was always her idea of perfect Chinese feminine beauty. And when I saw it, I was quite surprised. I thought she looks like a child. You know, she's so fragile. I guess, you know, growing up in Australia and growing up in my generation, I'm used to the kind of beauty role models that are a lot more kind of athletic and healthier.
If you see someone like that on the beach, you might want to tell her, you know, be careful, you might...
That's right. You might get swept away by the waves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
What about back in France? I mean, do you have you seen any changes or evolution?
There have been some changes, but I don't think it's I think it's easier to tell from models' point of view, from the body point of view. But I think the face, the way we see the face and beauty on the face, I don't think it has evolved that much. I think it would be tough to say, okay, over the decades we have seen this and that. You know, we like the nose like this or that. But what we can say is that obviously all over the world, the concept of beauty has become more and more international, because people are used now to see movies, to see any kind of person face, different skin color, different proportions in their everyday life. So now it's a little trickier to say what the
globalization of beauty,
exactly.
right?
You don't have the cliches now of you were talking about the model. We can say like Lu Yan is the typical example.
Exactly, because sometimes the faces or the girls who are seen as the beautiful ones in one culture might not be seen as beautiful in a different culture.
Yeah.
Lu Yan is one example, and many Chinese would say, well, she might be very successful on the catwalk, but she's not the most beautiful model that we have.
But
I think that's true of the fashion world in general, though, because most high fashion models look a little strange. They're very, very thin, very, very tall. They've got quite extreme features. They're not kind of, like your pin-up beauty, something that boys would necessarily like.
Exactly.
They're made to make clothes look good. So.
Which is why when you had girls who had the body for the
being a model.
So-called for the being a model, according to their times, of course, and the so-called perfect face became huge stars like Claudia Schiffer, Cindy Crawford in the mid-90s.
Christy Turlington is meant to have a beautifully symmetrical face as well.
Exactly.
But, I mean, even those girls, those 80s, the first batch of supermodels are a lot more athletic and a very different shape compared to the girls you see on the runways now, who are 14 years old and very, very thin.
Yeah.
So skinny.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, these models are all skinny, and some even died for being too skinny.
That's right.
I'm telling you, we have a lot of African viewers on this show. This is not the type of beauty that my African male friends like. They like a little meat and bones.
They like they Beyonce, do they?
You're talking about Beyonce. I mean, my African male friends, for them, Beyonce is the skinny type of the right proportions, but skinny type. Still.
Okay. And just now we've been talking about the different standards in different countries or different cultures. And when we come back after another short break, we'll talk about the changes that have happened in the past maybe decades in China. A short break.
Dum 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 dum.
Wherever you travel, always play safe. Safety comes first, and that goes for everyone.
And welcome back to Crossover. And now the changes, especially after 1949 when the People's Republic of China was founded. These are the criteria of being beauty at the time. Just take a listen. They're not bound to family life. That means they have their own jobs, they have their own career. They work and work only. No time for cosmetics. That is being encouraged. And they have the whole life dedicated to their career and to their work. And they're willing to be married to soldiers, workers, or farmers instead of thinking too much about the personality differences or compatibility.
Can I just say how completely polar opposite that is to the 1950s in, say, the US at the same time? I mean, that was the Mad Men era of ultra femininity. Women were housewives, they raised children, they dressed beautifully, they smoked cigarettes and drank martinis while their kids ran around the house. They always had their hair perfectly done, face full of makeup, husbands would never see them without makeup on. It just strikes me as, on the other side of the world,
it seems that
Chinese
two
women
ends of one stick.
Are in a lot of ways incredibly progressive because, it took American women a long time to get to that level of independence and being able to make those decisions.
Yeah, since let's say 1949 it has been pretty high in China. Basically on the basis of it, it's pretty equal. There are things that even still in France, I mean, this is off topic, but even salaries is sometimes really different from between men and women in France for the same job, which I don't really see in China.
It's the same in Australia. I mean, there's still that glass ceiling, and that's why a lot of women decide to leave, because it's not worth kind of fighting when you're always going to be 20 or 30% less paid than your male counterparts for often doing the same job.
And actually women are seen as the half the sky, as you may have heard.
Women hold up half the sky.
Yeah.
That's
exactly.
And we have actually some pictures to show how women looked like at the time. These people are seen as the beautiful ones.
But these are the old years. It's a little slightly different because there was a very strong, it was the old days of communism, the really beginning of everything. So people were driven by a huge ideology here, which were also, it was all in one that was also aimed at, you know, having a kind of healthy mentality to move forward for the country and for, you know, to build a right society around a certain form of ideology. So it's a little different. I mean, of course, in the US at the same time, you can also say that, you know, what you were talking about, it's also another form of ideology, but it's slightly different than this that really, as you were saying, it's in the times, you know?
It is. Well, I mean, in the US, I think that sort of return to family was because of World War II. The country had lost so many men, so I think there was this emotional need to go back to building a family and to working on that. I think, yeah, you're right. It's a product of those historical times.
Exactly.
In the 1980s, and that was the beginning of the opening up policy, and people started to think about being different. You know, personality, individuality was back at the time.
Well, that was especially a really big boom at the time because a lot of you saw so many people who couldn't have proper education, especially go to the universities, and they all of a sudden started to go abroad. So to bring to China a lot of new concept, new
global influences.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So everything was so different.
And we have some pictures, and you would notice those trousers, the famous flare pants.
So in China, it was the 80s, right?
I think that was the 70s.
Yeah, in the
70s,
West, it was the
yeah,
70s,
yeah.
exactly.
So
I think my mum wore those. I've got a photo of her wearing them.
in the 1990s, and it's more about personality, being different, and one of the key words of being beautiful is you need to be very quick to catch up the pace, because it's changing every day. And it's not only about the traditional ideas of being like the one in the dream of red mansions, and not the traditional figures, traditional ideas.
So if you want to keep with the pace, what do? You change your facial expressions every day, or you do plastic
Or
surgery?
you get a good plastic surgeon.
You use a different liner on me.
That's horrible. Or put some different makeup on, you know, just to kind of, you know.
Yeah, I mean, at the time, it's basically a variety of standards. Say, different types of people are seen as the beautiful faces.
You know Conan O'Brien, who had the talk show, the Late Night with Conan O'Brien, and they had this funny thing they were doing sometimes, which was, we were imagining that those people would really fit well together and take two stars that can be really, really good looking together, and take their face and say, if they had a baby together, what would the baby look like? Wow. And they would put their faces, but with a computer. The two faces together and make a mixture of the two faces, and basically it would look like a horrible monster every time.
That sounds incredibly scary.
Yeah, I mean, people they've done something like that, and if you say, you know, the eyes of this actress they're beautiful, the nose from another one, the mouth from another one, put them together.
I think that's when
I can tell it's ugly, you know.
Plastic surgery gone wrong if you've got, you know, 17 features from 17 different people.
And in the 21st century, no standards, and with the help of makeup techniques and plastic surgery, so everybody can be beautiful.
Well, everybody is beautiful anyway. So they will always. No, I mean, I think if you believe it yourself, you are beautiful. I think confidence is a really big thing, which is why I always don't like what the plastic surgeons have been doing. I mean, of course, you have to agree that they have helped a lot of people, but you know, you want people to be confident, and you don't want